We've been having some of the greatest guests this week, and the trend continues right now with Laura Loomer. Laura, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm looking well. I haven't seen you in a little while, and you're looking just exquisite today as you run for Congress. And join us for what is a pretty sad conversation. Before we get to speaking about Phil Haney, who you've done extensive work with, I do want to remind everyone who might not be aware that Laura is running for Congress. And if you're in Florida's 21st District, you should definitely be voting for Laura. She's been one of the most outspoken first journalists and now politicians warning people about this impending infiltration by radical Islamist interests. And Laura, you've just been out there talking about this for a long time. You've introduced me to a lot of facts and details that I didn't know about. You worked with Phil Haney. What can you tell us about Phil, your work with him, and what happened to him recently?
Well, Phil Haney was a close friend of mine and somebody who I learned a lot from. And for people who don't know who he was just a brilliant man. He was one of the founding members of DHS, and he, spent his career trying to keep Americans safe. And he really was a scholar when it came to teaching people and really understanding the threat of Islamic terror and jihadism and the infiltration of those individuals within our government. And he was a whistleblower during the Obama administration, and he blew the whistle on how Obama's, Department of Justice was ordering for DHS databases to be scrubbed of information that, pertain to investigations into alleged or supposed Islamic terrorists or Islamic terror networks in America. And one of these cases that Phil Haney was investigating, and information was deleted, regarding this case, and could have, I guess, resulted in lives being saved and an awful terrorist attack being prevented, was the San Bernardino ISIS terrorist attack. And if you recall, several years ago, a married Muslim couple went to a holiday party in San Bernardino, California, and they opened up fire, and they clearly had extensive arms training, because the way that they were able to carry out the attack and then escape and use the tactical force that they did, they had ISIS training, and many people died. And in the aftermath of this, Phil Haney was on Fox News a lot talking about how, we have this culture in which authorities tell you to say something. If you see something, say something. And really, you get penalized, especially under the Obama administration, in which Obama really allowed for political correctness to hinder and really destroy a lot of our intelligence capabilities. It was well known during the Obama administration that he had requested that the FBI and other intelligence officials stop referring to Muslim terrorists as Muslim, and that he stop referring to them as Islamic terrorists. And so it became known as workplace violence. And when there were acts of Islamic terrorism in which, for example, one instance, an Islamic terrorist decapitated a woman, I believe in, Oklahoma? I think it was in Oklahoma. We'll have to verify that. I believe it was in Oklahoma, where a Muslim man decapitated a woman and started shouting Allahu Akbar. And he admitted that he did it in the name of Islam, and Obama called it workplace violence.
Wow.
Many of these instances occurred throughout Obama's administration. And so Phil wrote a book called See Something, Say Nothing. It's sitting on my counter over there. It's kind of sad because he signed it for me when we were doing some work together in Minnesota, in which he talked about this, talked about how during the Obama administration, our government, as the cover said, they submitted to jihad in a way by putting a chokehold on intelligence officials and people within the government who were trying to investigate terror networks. It's still something that's happening today, unfortunately, where you have individuals with jihadist ties or individuals who are jihadists who are within our government. I mean, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are the perfect examples. And I spent a lot of time on the ground in Minnesota, investigating Ilhan Omar and Keith Ellison with Phil Haney. And I remember, driving around with him in his RV and, going to different events and doing podcasts together in Minnesota about Keith Ellison, about Ilhan Omar. And this was when no one even knew who Ilhan Omar was, right? So Phil and I were talking about her subversion and what it would mean if she was elected. And unfortunately, a lot of those videos were on my Twitter, and so they've been deleted because Twitter banned me. So I have to go back in my phone and try to find them. But that photo right there was taken of when we were in Minnesota. We were in a parking lot, and we had gone to I remember we went to some Indian restaurant and had lunch. And we were talking about Ilhan Omar and Keith Ellison in 2018.
And so obviously Phil was alive when Ilhan Omar was elected to Congress. Did you speak to him about it at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we talked extensively about it. And, especially when I was banned, he was following my lawsuits because Phil had a lot of information on CARE and had been investigating CARE. And I, of course, sued CARE. And so Phil always really motivated me to keep on going and to not give up. And he would always send me emails whenever he would see me in the news, and he would say, "Keep it up, kiddo." So, it's really sad because Phil Haney was a great guy. And I don't believe for one second that he committed suicide. And I think even our nation's lawmakers believe he was murdered as well. You have a very suspicious case here where you have a DHS whistleblower who was exposing Islamic terrorism, who was found with a gunshot in the chest and, on the road. You don't kill yourself by shooting yourself in the chest. And even Louie Gohmert and Steve King have said that they believe that Phil Haney was murdered.
Not only that, Louie Gohmert went on to say that he was such close friends with with Phil Haney, and he was aware that Phil was in possession of information that some very dangerous people would be willing to kill him over, to the extent that Representative Gohmert and Phil Haney had a pact with one another that if either of them were to die and that it were to be announced as a suicide, the other would inform the public that in no way, shape, or form is that true. Phil Haney was preparing to remarry. He was writing another book. Do you have any insight, Laura, as to what he was doing there in Plymouth, California?
Well, I don't want to, I'm friends with a lot of people who are very close to Phil, and I don't want to release too much information because I don't know how much of it has been, made public. But
Right.
I was aware of some of the things that Phil was doing with his career at the moment, and he was working on another book. And last time I spoke to Phil, he told me that he had been doing some work regarding the Council on American Islamic Relations. And I knew for a fact that he had information that really could have been damning to a lot of people and put a lot of very bad guys away. But that's why his death is even more suspicious because, CARE is a Muslim Brotherhood organization. These people are tied to terrorists and terrorist organizations. The Holy Land Foundation terrorism trial found that CARE was supporting Hamas. All right. They fundraise with imams who are co-conspirators and, in World Trade Center bombings. They fundraise with Ilhan Omar, who has advocated for ISIS, and Hassan Shibli, who is the head of CARE Florida, who I've sued, actually. He was providing legal representation to Hoda Muthana, the ISIS bride, who proclaimed online that she wanted to murder Americans. And, she posted all of these really barbaric comments about how Americans deserve to die on social media, right? It's funny how ISIS terrorists have social media, but I don't.
Right.
And he was trying to advocate for this lady to come back into the United States. I mean, you have to be a pretty evil person to be advocating for an ISIS terrorist to come back into America and then to lie on top of it and say that this lady was a United States citizen when Secretary Pompeo, himself and the Trump administration themselves said that she was not a United States citizen. So CARE was going around lying to people, telling people that this lady was a United States citizen, this, very dangerous ISIS bride who had expressed, murderous intentions and terrorist threats towards Americans. And they're trying to portray her as a victim. And then they sued the Trump administration to get her back in. I mean, these are the type of people that target me. These are the type of people that, Phil Haney was investigating. And these are the type of people who, had targeted Phil. And I have a screenshot of this. I should send it to you. Let me look at it. Hold on. But
Sure.
it's like a Sharia watch list. And CARE was actually posting about Phil Haney on their Facebook page, and they made it
Prior
seem
to
as
his
if
death?
a bounty. What?
Prior to his death, they were posting on their Facebook page in a way that you feel seemed like a bounty, calling out for somebody to do harm to Phil?
I'll find the exact screenshot, but it was very concerning.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going to misquote it. Let me just pull it up and I'll
Sure.
read it to you.
Yeah, no problem. You could even you could text it to me or send it some way, and we'll get it up on screen for everybody to see. While Laura's looking for that, I want to remind people to visit Laura Loomer for Congress.com. If you're in Florida's 21st District and you're not registered to vote, get registered and make sure you vote for Laura. You can also support Laura's campaign wherever you are in the United States. Click on the donate button and you can help Laura get into Congress and counteract some of the subversive infiltration that's going on there. Laura, you were the first person to tell me about the explanatory memorandum from the archives of the Muslim Brotherhood, and Phil was an important fact witness in the Holy Land Foundation trial. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time. I'm just looking for this graphic for you. I spent a lot of time talking to Phil about these topics, and when we were on the ground in Minnesota, we did several shows about this. But yeah, Phil spent his time educating people about counterterrorism and things like the Holy Land Foundation terrorism trial and whatnot. Here it is. Let me find it for you. I just pulled it up.
If you just want to text it, we could get it on screen for everybody. Now, the other thing, Laura, this document, for people who are seeing it for the first time, it's essentially a handbook describing a plan to commit cultural jihad in the United States that involves infiltrating businesses and government, local, state, and even federal government. And we're seeing that happen. You've mentioned Keith Ellison and Ilhan Omar. Keith Ellison's now the Attorney General in Minnesota, where you have been physically assaulted by another congressperson.
I just sent it to you. So basically this graphic you'll see on your phone, it's from June 5th of 2018. And they called it the anti-Muslim roundup. Well, if you're going to round people up, what are you doing to them?
Mm-hmm. Right.
What do you do to people in a roundup?
Round them up and kill them, I guess. I don't know. I haven't been involved in roundups.
It's like the type of language that people that jihadists use. It's the type of language that dictators use, and it's the first thing I think of are like firing squad roundups, right? And so for me, I just find it to be really weird. If you look at this graphic in which they put the Islamic crescent, they always in their imagery, they put Islamic crescents above people's heads, right? It's like a form of superiority because they want to show that it's dominating. And so they have this document and this text here tracking their activities. And so, like I said, I traveled to Michigan and Minnesota with Phil, and they were tracking his location here in this post and letting people know like that he was going to be in Michigan and where he was going to be. And they called it an anti-Muslim roundup, right? Wow. And several of the other people photoed here have been targeted as well. You have Pamela Geller, if you recall, during her event in Garland, terrorists opened fire and they tried to kill her. You have Robert Spencer, who has also received many death threats. But I think that there's a real sinister element here. And I find the double standard to be egregious, right? You have groups like CARE that go around accusing people like me and Phil Haney and others of being anti-Muslim bigots when they themselves, right, have been recognized as being a terrorist organization by Muslim majority nations, okay? And our federal judges have found ample evidence showing that CARE was tied to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. But then they're able to post things like this online, and they're able to essentially create these graphics and these posts that make it look like a bounty, right? And I don't understand how they're still operating here in the United States, or why, there's not more attention on the fact that these people who Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are bringing into their offices are advocating for ISIS brides, right? Suing the Trump administration on behalf of an ISIS bride. It just seems like these are not the type of people who should be in Congress, or the type of people who should be advising members of Congress. And, I've received threats from people as a result of posts that have been made by groups like CARE. In fact, they decided to make me the focus of their Ramadan fundraiser this last year. Wow. And, they were encouraging Muslims to fight back against me. And their litigation director in New York actually, was celebrating the fact that I had been banned everywhere. And then, posted, he said that he hopes that all Islamophobes suffer the same fate as Laura Loomer. And then he posted the word takbir, Allahu Akbar, which is basically what jihadists chant before they, carry out acts of jihad. So essentially, you could make the argument that this guy was literally advocating for acts of jihad against my life. But
I want to add, Laura, that the Muslim Brotherhood is fairly sophisticated in its communication tactics. They've posted this on PR Newswire, which of course is a press release, not a news article. This is something that they've written to sort of categorize what occurred in a way that's appealing to them, not necessarily factual.
Yeah, and that's actually factually incorrect, because my case is on appeal right now. And so, they want to say that they defeated me in court, but litigation takes a really long time, and this case is still ongoing. Right. In fact, I had a conversation with my attorneys last week. So the case is still very much alive, and they have this victim mentality where they constantly have to accuse everybody who goes against them or exposes them as being anti-Muslim or Islamophobic. But they even admitted to the Wall Street Journal in an article that was published last year that they lobbied Twitter to ban me. Okay. And since then, they have utilized, my bans as a fundraising mechanism. Like I said, during Ramadan, and I have the screenshots, like just a few weeks ago, for like an entire month, they had my face on the front cover of the CARE National website, So I know that Phil Haney was doing a lot of work exposing these people, and he had a lot of information that he still hadn't released. But it's all very concerning, because I definitely do not believe that Phil Haney committed suicide.
Right. You mentioned Garland, Texas, and the woman who was it that they opened fire on in Garland, Texas?
Well, it's the Pamela Geller Muhammad cartoon contest, if you recall the Muhammad cartoon contest, and these terrorists arrived, and they tried to open fire, and
wow,
not a good situation. And look, I'm not accusing these groups of having a role in Phil Haney's death by any means. I'm simply saying these are bad people. These are really bad people, really bad, dangerous ties that are here with regards to actual terrorist organizations that are recognized as such by the United States government. Okay, they fundraise openly with people who have called for the killing of homosexuals, called for the killing of Jews and Christians. And I know that Phil Haney was investigating them. And as someone who also has done a lot of investigative journalism and work in the counter-terror, counter-jihad movement, especially with regards to my investigative journalism, I know how vicious these people can be. And I've received plenty of death threats, over the years from hottest on the internet telling me that I should be decapitated or killed, or lots of anti-Jewish comments. And we know that these people, we know that these groups like CARE, for example, which Phil was investigating, that they're not exactly fond of Jews. Many of their employees and the people who they associate with have been on the record making very anti-Jewish comments. So it's very unfortunate, because I looked up to Phil as somebody who I could always seek advice from, and as somebody who was really like a mentor. He was just so intelligent, and that's one of the worst things about his death as well, is all the knowledge that went with him, and who knows if we're ever going to find out what was in these documents that he had. Who knows if we're ever going to find out what type of information he was planning on releasing.
Wow. And I believe there was a computer taken, so there is potentially, as you say, missing documents and ongoing investigation that he was doing. So, all right, I want to be sensitive to not asking you to reveal anything that you might know that Phil may want to keep quiet. But this town of Plymouth, California, he was there in an RV, but this is not really where Phil lived, right? He was from the Washington, D.C. area.
Well, Phil was living in his RV. And so about a year or so ago, his wife passed away. And Phil was just living in his RV because that's how he traveled and got around. And so I don't know if he had any other property or not, but I do know that he was living and working out of his RV.
And he did that because he could go all around the country investigating wherever he needed to investigate,
Yeah.
right?
All over, and I remember in Minnesota that's what he was doing. We would meet up and he'd drive in his RV. That picture we were taking was taken right outside of his RV.
And if I ask you anything that you don't want to answer, Laura, just feel free to say that, but did he ever mention Mule Creek State Prison to you?
He did not, no.
It's a very specialized prison facility that is located remarkably close to where Phil's RV was found. It's the only prison, let me make sure I'm reading this correctly. I'll bring up the Wikipedia thing here. It's, where have we got it here? Mule Creek State Prison. It's a specialized prison that where is it? It is exclusively, it's the only California state prison exclusively for sensitive needs yards, SNY inmates. And they're segregated from the general prison population for their own safety. Many are gang dropouts, informants, sex traffickers, and former law enforcement officers. So I just wonder if Phil wasn't attempting to meet with someone, communicate with someone, find someone in this prison. There's a lot of interesting characters in there.
I don't know. I never spoke to him about that, and I haven't heard about that. But what I do know is that Phil was found dead with a gunshot wound to the chest. And if you're going to kill yourself, you're not going to shoot yourself in the chest. And ultimately, I believe that this needed to be investigated as a homicide from the get-go. And, in the initial reporting, they tried to make it seem like it was, being investigated as a suicide. And I don't know why they would even saturate the media with that idea or even plant that idea in the minds of people, because, it's just so ridiculous, especially for people who knew Phil personally. He constantly would tell people that he would never commit suicide. And I believe that even Louie Gohmert said that. And there were reports of him having lunch with people over the last month saying, oh, well, I feel like something might happen to me, but I would never commit suicide. So, I see that Louie Gohmert and Steve King are now, validating these claims in their own conversations with Phil Haney, who told them that he would never commit suicide. And they almost made this pact. That's what Louie Gohmert was really describing on the floor of the House, in which he was saying, that if either of us so-called committed suicide, that we would get to the truth of what really happened, right? So I just think that this is not getting enough media attention. It should be receiving a lot more media attention, especially given how high profile Phil was. A lot of people may not know his name, but in terms of like the whistleblower community, and especially the counter jihad community, he's huge. And given the fact that he's a whistleblower, people should be paying extremely close attention, because there's a history in our country of whistleblowers being murdered, or whistleblowers, suspiciously dying or committing suicide. And for me, I think that whenever somebody releases information or they come out and expose some type of corruption that's taking place within the government, and they end up dying, I believe that there needs to be extra attention placed on their investigation into the death.
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking some of these questions, and they're not even necessarily questions for you specifically, Laura. I just find that when we talk about these kind of things, it tends to get the information out to people who then sometimes contact me anonymously, drop me these little bits of information. That's where I'm finding out about all this. There's a notable character in that Mule Creek State Prison who I want to tie to something else that you've done a lot of investigating in. I'm talking about Las Vegas. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy, David Turpin. Do you know who he is?
I have heard of the story. I know that, I think, is that the case where they had all those children like shackled up in the home
Right.
and they were abusing, starving them? Yes.
Yes, this is a guy, David Turpin, and his wife, I think her name is Louise. Yeah, Louise. They had 13 children together. Interesting when they choose to publish these things at 1:11 p.m., but on February 22nd, 2/22/111. But David Turpin is a guy who worked, not unlike Mr. Paddock, for Lockheed Martin. And it's just strange to me. People know that I've done a lot of coverage with David Hawkins of the death of another child of a Lockheed Martin employee, John Benet Ramsey. So there's all these strange things going on with employees of Lockheed Martin, and that certainly doesn't mean that Lockheed Martin is guilty of anything, but it's curious that Phil would be in this town so near this prison where this guy who, he just went to jail in April, I think, of 2019, and he's being held in this prison. I don't know if it's because he's an informant or if it's because he's a former gang member or if it's because he's a child abuser. But this is a weirdo guy. He's got 13 children with this woman and then they kill them all. Who would do that? And why is Lockheed Martin hiring him? And I mean, when you see this guy's mannerisms in court, how he's dressed, how he presents himself, he doesn't seem like a very normal guy to me, Laura. So I'm just curious about what's going on. And it's just, I never knew Phil personally, but in reviewing his work and in talking to you about him, I do feel a tremendous sense of loss at his death. And I definitely want to find out what he was working on that would potentially motivate somebody to be so, they wanted to stop him.
Yeah. And I don't know about a lot of this other stuff that you're talking about. I'm more focused on, the possibility of retaliation against him for his work in the counter jihad movement, just because, I do know, and I won't say who exactly, but even associates of his in the week that he was found dead received letters in the mail threatening their lives too. And so who knows, a lot of these people in the counter jihad movement, they get death threats on a regular basis. But, I was supposed to be going to Israel with Phil in a few months. So last year we were in Israel together too. And I was supposed to be going on this national security trip with him that was planned. And some of the people on that trip had received threats as well. So I'm very concerned about this. And like I said, he was a friend of mine, somebody who I looked up to. And, I'm not saying that he was targeted for these reasons. You never know. It's an active investigation. It could have been something totally unrelated to his work, right? You never know. And I'm not here to say that it is or it isn't. But what I am saying is that I'm pretty sure it's very obvious to people, especially elected members of Congress who, you just showed the article there, they don't even believe that he committed suicide. And so what I would like to know is why there's such a lack of media coverage on this.
Well, it's an excellent question, and I am very curious as to why that would be as well. And it's another reason why I wanted to have you on to discuss this today. Sarah Carter has been more active in covering it than most other sources, but she had this story about 2 weeks ago, how the sheriff
backtracked on the suicide. Yeah. They had to delete the press statement from their Facebook page. So they put out a Facebook page statement saying that it was being investigated as a suicide, and then they deleted it. So yeah, they are backtracking. And I think that it was highly inappropriate for them to have even, mentioned that in the very beginning, knowing that this guy is a whistleblower. once you interject a narrative into the media, people believe what they hear first, right?
That's right.
And so a lot of people were posting, oh, he committed suicide. Oh, he committed suicide. And that's just not the case. They
Right.
should have not even said anything. They should have said from the very beginning that it was being investigated as a possible homicide. But unfortunately, they were able to taint a lot of people's first impressions of this. And people, when they think someone committed suicide, they just kind of like give up on it, right? Which is what they did in the Las Vegas shooting too, right? They said that this guy killed himself. And so people just kind of stopped talking about it. And then there was a media blackout. But saying that somebody committed suicide is just like a very lazy way of passing something off that really, like I said, he's a whistleblower. They should have taken this, especially as law enforcement officers. They should have thought to themselves, well, there is a chance that, given that he's a whistleblower, that he maybe had a lot of enemies, or maybe he pissed some people off, or maybe there were people who were out to get revenge, or people who didn't like what he did. I mean, that's the first thing that I think as an investigative journalist, right? Or that's, I'm running for office now, but, my career is in investigative journalism. And I immediately, when I received the phone call around 10 o'clock at night that he had been found dead, that's immediately what I first thought of.
Right. Well, and certainly I could understand a sheriff not wanting to speculate about who or what might have caused it, but simply saying, we have no comment at this time because it's an ongoing investigation. I appreciate that you're being very diplomatic and erring on the side of caution, not only as a congressional candidate, but as an extremely responsible journalist. I take a little bit more of a, let's call it, opinion position on some of these things. And I do believe that any competent law enforcement officer would look at the scene, look at the body, and not immediately presume that it would be suicide. In response to the possibly hypothetical question that you pose of why would the sheriff be so foolish as to put out that finding, I think he did it with the intent, as you said, of getting that thought out first, so that now when someone like you or I produce a video like this, questioning the motives or the possible perpetrators, we can immediately be branded as conspiracy theorists, and people will remember that it was a suicide, just like with Vince Foster and so many others.
You're right about that. They want to call people conspiracy theorists. But when you have members of Congress talking about how they essentially made, this isn't their exact words, but this is my inference based off this whole pact notion, like suicide pacts, right? In terms of, oh, well, we're both not suicidal. And so if anything were to ever happen to you or someone would say that you were suicidal, I would make sure that I would, inform the public about this. That's really concerning. These aren't just regular people. These are United States congressmen and also very close friends and colleagues of Phil Haney who said the same thing. And so when you have, people saying, oh, I had lunch with Phil Haney a month before he was killed, and he said that he thought something would happen to him, and that if they said that he committed suicide, that it wasn't true, and then he ends up dead, with a gunshot wound a month later, and they're saying it's suicide, I think that that is a problem. And so I'm really hoping, I know that some of my colleagues in this counter jihad movement are doing their own investigations and looking into things, but, I really hope for the sake of his family and also just for the sake of the truth and for the sake of the information that, maybe is still out there, or maybe he's saved somewhere. I hope that we get the truth on this matter because, man, he's such a brilliant man. And I just think of the loss of life is tragic, but even more so is just his life work and all of the information and intel that this man had that probably could have saved lives and could have really, exposed a lot of people doing bad things within our government. It's gone. He had so much information.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, it's interesting to me, Laura, because it wasn't too long ago that one of the major newspapers here in New York City, the New York Post, had 3 separate stories over the course of a week about a hamburger that somebody had allegedly dropped in the street in Queens. I don't see a single story from the New York Post about Phil Haney. And as a matter of fact, when you put in Phil Haney into Google and tap on news, most of the stories are 2 or more weeks old. We just saw a brief clip of Jim Hoft of Gateway Pundit had interviewed his pastor. And so everybody from his friends to his family to his pastor, everybody knew this guy was not suicidal. And we haven't heard a single thing from the sheriff's office since they announced this backtrack and deleted the Facebook post. Very strange behavior from them.
Yeah, as you mentioned too, he was, supposedly set to get married soon too. So it is all very, concerning. And I think most rational minds here, as Louie Gohmert and Steve King put so, eloquently, they realize that, he was murdered.
Yeah. So it remains a mystery, and we certainly don't want.
Just add too, you would think that United States congressmen making those statements on the House floor would receive a ton more attention given the fact that this guy was a DHS whistleblower. And just the fact that the mainstream media is completely ignoring this story about Louie Gohmert and Steve King saying that a U.S. whistleblower who exposed, jihadist subversion and jihadist infiltration under the Obama administration and orders from his administration to scrub databases to basically, hide information or erase information pertaining to, terror threats in America. That should be a huge story if they're now saying House floor that this guy was murdered. So, it also just goes to show you the very lazy nature of our mainstream media and how, look, we're being bombarded with all types of news on a daily basis. I can't even tell you every time I turn on the TV and I see stories that don't even matter, right? Things that I don't even care about, things that really are just really nonsensical and don't pertain to the lives of everyday Americans. But I believe that this issue of Islamic infiltration is a huge national security threat, and it's something that I obviously have dedicated a lot of my career to exposing. And the fact that this guy, my friend, this whistleblower, Phil Haney, is dead, right, after exposing this, whenever a United States representative makes a claim like that, I think that there should be way more media coverage. I mean, look at they report on AOC buying a dog. They report on Ilhan Omar dancing on TikTok. They report on all these nonsensical things about members of Congress that really just don't matter, But then when it comes to congressmen making really impactful, important statements that could impact our national security with regards to the information that Phil had, like, where's the media is what I would like to know. You see AOC I have a bulldog too, right? I mean, look, so what? You got a bulldog.
She's in the doghouse.
It's just crazy to me what they focus on. They'll write a story about someone buying a dog, but they won't talk about a whistleblower being murdered.
I'll tell you, Laura, this is the only Democrat you're going to see behind bars in 2020 unless Donald Trump really pulls it out and starts doing what we need him to do. But you're raising an excellent point. Again, I appreciate your diplomacy, but I need to stress that I personally don't think, and if you're not able to say it, I appreciate that. I don't think it's a matter of laziness. I think that there is a definite agenda among...
I'll say it. I don't think it's not just laziness. I think that there's a definite agenda, and I learned this when I was doing my Las Vegas shooting investigation. It's lazy, and it's also, their complicit nature in the way that they choose to not talk about these things. I mean, the mainstream media never likes to talk about things that have ties to Islamic terrorism, and when they do, they whitewash it completely. I mean, look at the Washington Post, right, referring to Baghdadi as an austere religious scholar. So, yeah, I'm not naive. Like, it's more than just laziness. It's a form of, complicit behavior, and especially after what I saw with Vegas, it's a full-blown, cover up, really, is what it is, and it's irresponsible. But when they have all... Look, the way I look at it is we're independent journalists, right? I'm now running for office, but as an independent journalist, I didn't have tons of funding. Okay, you don't have tons of funding, but we're able to somehow break stories and get information out faster than the mainstream media. And even now, I'll hear about things and I'll know about things way before the mainstream media even post it. And then 5 hours later, finally, I'll see a Fox News update. So what are all these multi-billion-dollar news organizations that are, paying for journalists and very expensive camera gear, and they're trying to serve as the moral gatekeepers too, to see and establish on TV who is and who isn't an acceptable person or expert, right? What are these getting paid to do all day? How is it that independent journalists are breaking this news faster? It's just It's crazy to me. So you would think that if they were going to be slow in the reporting, as they always are, that they would at least make up for it by being aggressive in their investigative skills or produce detail-filled reports, but they don't want to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's clear, I think, to people who follow you and people who are watching Crowdsource the Truth, that entities like the Washington Post, let's set aside for a moment that this newspaper, if we can call it that, is owned by Jeff Bezos, who also owns Amazon and Whole Foods. And I wonder who would benefit, from a retail standpoint, if everybody was isolated in their home and could do nothing but look at the internet and order crap off of Amazon. It seems interesting. Or if you're flooding into the store to buy toilet paper and bottled water, if you live near a Whole Foods, I mean, look, I'm not diminishing the severity of anyone who is in ill health, who contracts a virus that could result in death, whether that's the flu or coronavirus or whatever. But there is a clear agenda, Laura, where they are just maybe more persistently than certainly anything I can remember in recent memory. They want you to be extremely fearful of contracting this coronavirus. And I have little doubt that in a short period of time, some vaccine will come on the scene. And I wouldn't at this point even be surprised if a law was passed making it mandatory that if you want to go out in public, if you want to have a bank account, if you want to go to a restaurant or the Whole Foods or order something from Amazon, you got to have your vaccination against this horrendous thing. So we're going to wait and see if that comes. But when we think about the people that control these entities, all you would really need is Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates to have a coffee together and hatch some plan like this. And I'm not saying that those two individuals did or will do anything. But when you think about the consolidation of wealth, power, and influence, it's an interesting thing to consider.
Well, regardless, I do think that when you look at the numbers, there's clearly more people who have died from the flu than from the coronavirus. And President Trump himself took to Twitter yesterday to even talk about this. And so I do believe that anytime there's any type of disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or whether it's a outbreak of a coronavirus, you see the way that the media really sensationalizes things. And so I think the media is being very reckless in their reporting of the coronavirus, and they're creating panic. And you see people are panic shopping. When you go to the store, everything is sold out. You go to the store, there's no soap left. There's no hand sanitizer. All the cleaning supplies are being sold out. So I went grocery shopping the other day and I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find any soap. I was looking for just antibacterial hand soap and I couldn't find any. It was all sold out. And so I think that they're being very reckless. And while I do believe that, look, obviously the coronavirus is stronger than the flu, and there are certain populations in our country who are more susceptible. It seems like this is hitting older people the hardest, and people who are 60 and above, or people who have compromised immune systems are dying from this if they are infected. I have been listening to a lot of the different reports and medical opinions on it. And, if somebody my age, 26, were to contract it, you'd probably get very ill, but your chances of, surviving it are very high compared to somebody who is older or, like I said, has a compromised immune system. But look, things like this happen every day. You never know what can happen. You can get in your car, you can die in a car accident, right? You can get struck by lightning. Anything can happen. And it's not a way to minimize it, but I do believe that, what we're seeing online right now is having, a dangerous social effect, because people are catastrophizing, right? And people are starting to get very panicked to the point where they're isolating themselves. And then this can have a really big impact on the economy. And so I believe that the media and public health officials have a responsibility to, really, minimize the panic by kind of inserting a sense of reality into the mindset of people and calming people down, because you're not necessarily going to die from this if you contract it. It's a serious virus, but they're making people believe that if they contract it, they're going to drop dead like flies,
Right.
And if you listen to people and you look at the posts online of people talking about it, people are in a doomsday mentality. But look, here in Florida, I know Governor Ron DeSantis has issued a public health emergency regarding coronavirus. There's been a couple deaths here in Florida. And I saw the report that there were a few more cases announced in Broward County. And so my campaign, just right before coming on your show, we're taking safety measures, especially given the fact that I'm running in a district, Florida 21, where there are a lot of older people or people who may be more susceptible. And so I decided to halt my petition drive today. And we will not be doing any more petitions. And we're going to slow down our door knocking and halt it for the time being, and really just focus on online communications for the time being, because just the other day at the Palm Beach Convention Center, somebody who attended an event there and went back, I believe, to Pennsylvania, tested positive for corona. And so I want to make sure that my constituents are safe, that the voters are safe, and that my volunteers especially are safe, because as you know, in campaigning, you have to shake a lot of hands. You have to do a lot of contact with people, and it's not exactly the best thing to be doing if you're trying to prevent the spread of a virus. And so I'm going to be paying to get on the ballot instead. But for me, I think the price of paying to be on the ballot is worth it, and it's not a problem, and nothing is worth jeopardizing people's health and their safety. And so that's a decision that I made as the head of my campaign, and I'm hoping that this gets resolved soon, or it gets controlled, and that people get more answers, because making America safe again is a really key aspect of my political campaign, and you can't make America safe again if people are sick. And so I'm hoping that people who are infected get better soon, and that you just got to wash your hands and stay calm. Don't panic.
Absolutely. And it presents, ironically, a good opportunity for people who are outside of Florida's 21st district to help Laura get on the ballot, because now that she's going to be paying to do that, people can donate, and those funds will go towards helping Laura get on the ballot. So if you want to really take part in making a change in Congress, here's your chance. You can donate any amount, and I'm sure Laura is going to put that money to good use. We really need somebody like Laura in Congress, in my opinion, and I am certainly endorsing Laura for Congress for Florida's 21st district. I know you're very busy.
Your parents are going to vote for me.
You're not supposed to say that. People now know more about my parents than they did a minute ago, but that's okay. When we look at this coronavirus coverage, Laura, we see that whatever Donald Trump does, so here's the New York Post. They've got something stupid to say about Donald Trump shaking hands with somebody who, I think it's Representative Collins.
I have too, and I interacted with people who interacted, with individuals too. But you have to understand, and I believe that you do. I think that the media really, honestly, they get paid for clicks, right? And so they released a statement this morning saying that President Trump is fine, Congressman Gates is fine, they are not feeling any symptoms. But when people see headlines like that, they immediately click on it, and then they start panicking and they start talking. It's our media in this day and age has become very sensationalized. But yes, I do believe that the situation. Obviously they're making the right decision to self-quarantine themselves. It's the responsible thing to do, especially as a lawmaker and somebody who has a lot of contact with people and constituents on a daily basis. But I do believe that, President Trump, he's appointed Mike Pence as his coronavirus czar, and they just were in Florida a few days ago, and they gave a big, briefing on that. And Mike Pence was speaking to the heads of the different cruise ships to talk to them about their needs and what they need to make sure that people on the cruise ships are getting the test, because they have a bunch of cruise ships that right now people are on board and they're awaiting coronavirus tests. But I believe he's doing everything that he can really to handle this situation. And I think that the media is just dying. They're salivating at the mouth for something to, blame the president over, because they blame him for everything. I mean, this is a guy who could literally find a cure for the coronavirus or find a cure for cancer and AIDS, and they would still find something bad to say about him. But
absolutely,
people need to calm down, okay? And I think that a lot of the panic is coming from the fact that when people call the CDC or they ask about testing, there isn't a lot of information about where to get testing. But nothing improves if people are panicked and making decisions in a state of anxiety and panic. So it's fine to be concerned and it's fine to be worried, but you gotta calm down and you gotta handle things in a very rational, calm manner.
Yeah. Laura, you've got, as I've said during this interview, a much more diplomatic view of the press than I do. And people will perhaps think this is a bit extreme, but I personally believe that there is a very large effort underway to convince people that this coronavirus is deadly. I often look for these steganographic markers in news reporting, but this is a guy that you've interacted with, Laura, Gavin Newsom. He's detailed 33 California coronavirus cases. That's a remarkably coincidental number. I think if you start looking around for occurrences of the number 33, and consider my opinion that that is a marker sending out a signal to people in the know that this is something that's under control. 33,000 emails from Hillary Clinton. The doctor who was the Wuhan whistleblower was allegedly 33 years old. Frankly, if you just put in coronavirus and 33, you're going to see a remarkable number of references to that number. 33 test negative for coronavirus in Georgia. It's just astounding. People who are looking at this, 33 cases in New York.
I think that, like I said with the media, it's not that I'm being diplomatic. I really do believe that the media, we all know this. I've said this before, and I have no problem saying it. The media has a very anti-Trump bias. And so anything they can do to try to demonize this president or cast blame on him, especially for a virus that he has no control over, they're going to do. And I think the media is trying to make people panic. Obviously, the media coverage is very sensational about this, especially when you compare it to President Trump's tweet regarding the flu. I think people still need to be concerned, of course, but there's absolutely no reason why people should be blaming President Trump for this virus. And I've seen several comments online and, really just very reckless, derogatory reporting from reporters on CNN and MSNBC who are trying to blame the president for this. And that's really dangerous because when you start making people feel as if they're in a life or death situation and that they have to panic, they go into survival mode. Right. And when people go into survival mode, they start doing things that they necessarily wouldn't always do.
Desperation.
People start to feel desperate, and the media is making people feel desperate. And that is very, very dangerous.
It absolutely is. And, I don't know how you feel about Dr. Drew, but there was an article in True Pundit just today that is describing how he agrees with you. He thinks that the media is hurting people, being irresponsible in their sensationalist reporting, and that they need to be held accountable. I mean, this is so true. People rely on these news reports to get information that they're going to use to protect their families.
Not only that, Jason, but I went to the store and I tried to find hand sanitizer. I couldn't find any. I needed to find hand soap. I couldn't find any. There's no rubbing alcohol. It's sold out. There are people who are going to really need these supplies, okay? And there are people who are going to be suffering from I'm not talking about coronavirus related things. I'm talking about illnesses where they need some rubbing alcohol, or they may need something, or people who are ill and have compromised immune systems may really need to go buy some hand sanitizer or some soap. And a lot of these supplies are being sold out, and then there's price gouging on Amazon and price gouging on eBay. And I think that it's going to create a supply shortage for people who may really need these supplies and can't get them. And that's also really dangerous, because then you have people who may not need things, like hoarding onto supplies because they're making everyone in this country, around the world, feel like it's some type of doomsday crisis where you're not allowed to leave your home and you got to stockpile up on everything. I made a comment to one of my family members. The media is making people feel like they're living in a real life episode of The Walking Dead,
right.
With the way that they're characterizing this coronavirus.
Yeah, it seems like the price gouging on Amazon may have come under control, but it was an issue for a few days. This
There a bottle of hand sanitizer for $200 on Amazon the other day. I mean, it's out of
amazing.
control. And, you know, and then that puts people at risk, especially low income people who, you know, need to buy supplies too and can't find any. So it's really awful. It's just really horrendous what the media is doing, and they are hurting people.
They are. And this, I mean, one of the biggest things that they've been promoting is this concept of self-isolation. I mean, how Orwellian is that? You should just sit in your house. You should not talk to anyone. Don't shake hands with anyone. Just order things from Amazon.com and watch BBC and listen to CNN and the Washington Post and stay home and shut up and vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah, I'm hoping that things really calm down soon, and I wish that the media would stop with their reckless reporting. But look, I'm confident that the Trump administration is going to handle this, and it's not his fault. Viruses spread. People travel all over, and so this didn't even originate here. It clearly came from Wuhan, China. And when you think of all the times people are flying in and out and where people go and all the contact people have, viruses spread like wildfire. So I don't know how any rational person could blame this on the president and his administration, but he clearly is doing a lot. Just this week in Florida, even when early voting began, you know, Mike Pence was addressing people, and the administration has been pretty good as far as I'm concerned in their response regarding this.
Not only that, Laura, it was interesting that when Donald Trump had an early reaction to shut down travel, everybody was saying, oh, you know, that's racist or whatever. And
right, and they're trying to say, oh, you didn't shut down travel,
right?
And what they're trying to do is they're trying to demonize people for being racist, for calling it the Wuhan virus, when 3 weeks ago CNN and MSNBC were calling it the Wuhan virus. So to these people, like I said, he could literally find a cure for this, and he could find a cure for cancer and AIDS in the same day, and they would still have something bad to say about him. Okay, they are never happy. Everything it's so funny because you can like see these screenshots of CNN saying, oh, it's so racist for people to refer to this as Wuhan virus, and then 3 weeks later, the same reporter from CNN calling it Wuhan. So, you know, there's no moral integrity, or these people don't have values in the media. It's just
absolutely. It's absolutely absurd. Now, Laura, I know you're very busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with everybody today. Got to remind everyone to visit Laura Loomer for Congress, and if you're in Florida's 21st district, or if you have relatives there, make sure you tell them to vote for Laura. If you're not able to vote in Florida, but you want to support Laura, you can donate to the campaign. Can people outside the United States donate to the campaign, Laura?
No, only United States citizens. So, I mean, I guess there are United States citizens who live outside of the United States, but you have to be a United States citizen to donate to my campaign or vote. And you have to be you have to live in District 21 in order to vote for me. But regardless of where you live in the United States, as long as you are a United States citizen, right? Because I'm not a Democrat. I'm not accepting foreign citizens. As you're a United States citizen, you can donate to my campaign.
Right. So if anyone's listening who's not alive or not a U.S. citizen, they're going to have to go vote for Democrats, and that'll be fine. But Laura, we wish you absolutely the best of luck with the campaign. I think it's very important that you get into Congress so that you can counteract this plan that was detailed in the explanatory memorandum, which we owe a debt of gratitude to Phil Haney for bringing to our attention. I hope that his death will not be in vain, and that lawmakers like Louie Gohmert and others in Congress, including Laura Loomer, hopefully very soon, will be able to make his work make a difference and find out what it was that somebody may have killed him for.
Right. Yeah, and you can go to lauraloomerforcongress.com and you can sign up for my email updates there. So thanks so much for having me on, Jason. And happy Purim. Happy Purim to the Jews.
That's right.
Listening.
I forgot today was Purim, so people can get out their groggers and put on a costume and yell about Haman and Queen Esther. People should go to Laura Loomer for Congress for sure. Laura, we'll have you back on very soon. Everybody is interested to know what's going to happen in the lawsuit against Rashida Tlaib, the lawsuit against Facebook, all of these social media platforms that, despite you being an official congressional candidate, refuse to allow you a platform on social media. That's real election interference.
I'm still out fundraising all of my opponents, including the Democrat incumbents. So I'm on Parler and I'm on Gab, so you can follow me there. But most importantly, sign up for my, my campaign updates at lauraloomerforcongress.com.
There we go, Laura Loomer for Congress. And thanks everybody for watching. Laura, we'll see you soon and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.